Assassin's Creed is not something you would normally find me discussing here on my YouTube channel, despite me being a huge AC fan. I mean, I played them all. Yes, even Freedom's Cry and Liberation. But more than just being an Assassin's Creed fan, I'm also a massive fan of Ubisoft games. Or at least I was, up until the mid-2016s, up into 2017, when the company took a dramatic turn from being unique and risk-takers, instead switching over to formulaic, bloated, and soulless. The amount of insanely great IP Ubisoft is currently sitting on is staggering. And what they've chosen to do with it, well, that is also equally staggering. Welcome to the channel. My name is LtBuzzLitebeer, and the past few weeks has not been kind to the French gaming giant, but this fall from grace started years ago, and it's a device of their own creation. Well, now we've got new insider reports on the inner workings at Ubisoft, and things are not looking good, especially for Assassin's Creed Shadows, the feudal Japan setting AC title we've all been screaming for that's now arriving 10 years late and mired in chaos. From the very moment Assassin's Creed Shadows hit YouTube with their first trailers, the alarm bells have been ringing loud and clear. Obviously, fans were not vibing with what Ubisoft had cooked up on this one. From the interesting character choices made with Yasuke, to the hip-hop soundtrack playing during combat sequences, to the unauthorized use of Sekigahara Teppo Tai flags in their artwork, to their absolute blunder of including the one-legged Torii Gate with their figurine collections. We've seen hit piece articles in the New York Times, mass downvoted trailers, rumors of investigations by the Japanese government over historical accuracy, even grumblings over pre-order pricing models. I mean, this has been a minefield of disaster laid out very clearly in front of Ubisoft, and they have systematically and methodically stepped on every single one of those mines, and it's just been explosion after explosion. This, of course, led to the most recent events, with Ubisoft pulling out of the Tokyo Game Show, and hot on the heels of that, we got the inevitable and expected delay announcement, pushing Shadows into a crowded and deep release month of February 2025. But it turns out there was far more going on internally with Ubisoft than just this single bonfire they had on their hands with Shadows. You see, 2024 was shaping up to be a string of sequential defeats for Ubi. Skull and Bones, their first quadruple A gaming release, had tanked, with rumors now surfacing the cost to deliver that title were grossly underestimated, now thought to be somewhere in the $650 to $850 million range. And we also saw X-Defiant come under the microscope. Now, with all eyes on Season 3, the revenues are clearly not there, and if Ubisoft's competition for Call of Duty can't keep up, well, it would have to go. This pattern plays out like a familiar tune, though, with Ubisoft year after year. Examples being Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Far Cry New Dawn, or Far Cry 6 for that matter, Watch Dogs Legion, Rainbow Six Extraction, Assassin's Creed Mirage. These all required heavy investments by the French publisher, and all were received with mediocre reception to just downright disdain, with only Assassin's Creed Valhalla truly standing out. Now, I personally never vibed with Valhalla. I'm a purist. Give me Ezio, give me Altair, give me the Kenways, and I'm golden. But Valhalla was just several bridges too far, and the bloat was overly strong with this one. However, it was a commercial success for Ubisoft, launching at the height of the COVID lockdown, available on all platforms, and they rode that cash cow straight to the bank. 2020 must seem like centuries ago to Ubisoft, and for one of their pillars of sustainability, Assassin's Creed, as we've now entered the post-delay wait for Shadows. And with that, the information is now starting to leak through the cracks. And interestingly, this has a lot to do with the title I did not mention in that earlier rundown, Star Wars Outlaws. Now, as pointed out in a recent Ubisoft internal memo, Outlaw's initial sales, quote, proved softer than expected, and although we don't yet know what Ubi was anticipating the units sold would be, it has been reported by Tom Henderson of Insider Gaming that Outlaws has just surpassed 1 million units sold. Now, before we dive into this complicated and tiered rationale for why Shadows was eventually delayed, can we just stop to discuss the fascinating information now coming out concerning Star Wars Outlaws? For a major AAA franchise like Star Wars to just now hit 1 million sales a month after release, that exposes several glaring weaknesses here, with number one being the Star Wars name itself has just lost much of its former mystique, but also number two, Outlaws was exposed and shown to be hurried to launch. It was missing core features. It had poorly designed character models, obvious AI problems, and the stealth-centric approach just wasn't both expanded enough, and it didn't vibe with what gamers were expecting from a solo scoundrel Star Wars experience. Ubi's CEO, Yves Guillemot, did his best to direct the narrative, pointing to critic ratings of 76 out of 100 on Metacritic, but I will say this. I've been on and attended hundreds of these investor calls, and when the CEO of the company uses language like sales were softer than expected, that actually translates to hold up, smash the glass, press the giant red button. It is really, really bad here at Ubi. As expected, Ubisoft followed up that announcement with a large adjustment to their expected earnings reports, driving their stock, which has steadily been declining ever since 2021, into a straight free-for-all, leading to investigators calling for investigations and even calls to sell Ubisoft and its entire portfolio of IP to a third party or private equity firm. Now, I know there was a lot of speculation about Assassin's Creed Shadows and how that delay announcement was the single driving factor to cause Ubi stock to plummet, but it's not. That's not how they work. In fact, I would argue that the much softer than expected sales of Star Wars, along with the 2024's barren and rocky release schedule, enter Skull and Bones and X-Defiant, those shoulder the majority of the blame. Ubisoft is shelling out huge amounts of cash for development, and in reality, they just aren't seeing the returns. Think of it this way. Let's imagine Ubisoft is a massive sailing vessel out on the high seas. It has its captain, Yves Guillemot, who sits at the helm and controls the rudder of Ubi, keeping it on course, traversing the ever-changing currents of game development, forever being pushed forward as their previous successful releases serve as wind in the sails. But what happens to that ship when the captain loses control of the rudder and the wind dies down to absolutely nothing? Well, naturally, the crew starts to panic, even beginning to talk of mutiny, and here's where we find Ubisoft. Adrift, rudderless, and without any wind in their sails. So what does Captain Guillemot do? He drops anchor, full stop, until a reevaluation of Shadows can be completed, because the panic and the rot has now started to set in. Outlaws, which they launched early and incomplete and had undoubtedly spent a ton of cash in development for, was not selling, and they could not afford another soft release, especially not with their go-to Assassin's Creed. So it was time to smash the big red button. Step one of Ubisoft's plan, now coming to us from an Insider Gaming article, was to take on and tackle one of the main points of discourse. Yasuke, part of the protagonist duo featured in Shadows, and one which recently was rumored to be on the chopping block as part of this reevaluation. Well, according to Henderson, and now spelled out in the article, that rumor is false. But he does point out sources have said that the team has been actively addressing many of the historical and cultural concerns, which started before the game's reveal following external playtest and were accelerated further following the game's initial reveal and mass feedback. I would like to note in there, it was probably after the mass downvote feedback. This includes changing some of Yasuke's story and how he's portrayed in the game, fixing architectural details, and ensuring that the game is historically grounded while fitting into the Assassin's Creed universe. Henderson then goes on to point out that historical experts were brought onto the project much later than usual for a project of this scale, and that, quote, miscommunication between teams and cutting corners when it comes to the approval process of assets to meet deadlines were also at play. Now, we could have that argument about the captainless ship right here and now, but how Ubi could drop the ball this hard, especially when working with a historically proud Japanese culture, well, that's going to be a topic that is dissected for years to come, but there it all is. How or what this involved restructuring of Yasuke would look like is something I just don't want to speculate on. I will tell you, they've only got 4 months to patch this thing up and get it ready for market, if that is, they even plan on releasing in mid-February, as whispers have already begun to circulate that even that date is just a placeholder. And this delay could actually extend far past just early 2025. Step 2 of Ubisoft's plan apparently comes from lessons and feedback learned from the Outlaws launch, and it has to do with the expectations of gamers and how a game launches in terms of polish and optimization. Now, Outlaws was clearly not ready, and Shadows has to deliver, or Ubisoft is facing real talks of buyouts or even bankruptcy. Now, Henderson also reports that the game is currently not at the stage it needs to be for release, and he's told that there have been some tweaks to some gameplay mechanics and elements that are going to take time to incorporate. Now, while some of these issues were highlighted in recent playtests and mock reviews, these are end-of-development issues that will take a little longer. Ubisoft Quebec is the studio behind Shadow's development, and if their previous AC title releases of Syndicate and Odyssey are any indication of what is coming, they certainly have the firepower and know-how to pull this off, as both of those titles were extremely polished. By the way, even one of their lesser-known releases, Immortals Phoenix Rising, was a surprisingly good little comedic romp through Greek mythology. So again, all eyes are now on Quebec and what they can do to salvage both Shadows and, on the broader scale, Ubisoft. The final bits of insider news here concerning Assassin's Creed Shadows actually involve the developers over at Ubisoft Quebec themselves, who, according to Henderson, have been pushing for a delay for some time, ultimately falling on deaf ears at Ubisoft HQ up until now. I mean, at least Ubisoft finally came to their senses and is bringing games back to Steam, but with all the recent drama surrounding Assassin's Creed Shadows, as expected, the pre-order sales are quite soft to that of Valhalla. Here's the question: will Shadows be enough to salvage what's left of Ubisoft? Again, I honestly don't know, but for someone that was with Ubisoft back in the golden years of 2007's launch of Assassin's Creed, I can tell you that from about 2016 to 2017, the soul and originality of old Ubisoft was lost, as was my desire to really get into any of their new releases. So there it all is, the latest with Assassin's Creed Shadows via Tom Henderson at Insider Gaming, and of course, all of his excellent work getting this information out to the public. After watching everything that's gone down with Shadows, and of course reading all of the leaked and internal memo discussions from Ubisoft, I just have so many questions I'd love to ask. The first of which is, will Shadows even be able to compete in a post Ghost of Tsushima, Ghost of Yotai gaming landscape? What's that even going to look like? Also, can Ubisoft even stay afloat for that long without being eaten from the inside out? Well, I guess we're about to find out all of that. Leave me any feedback you have about Shadows, Assassin's Creed, or Ubisoft in general, and I will of course do my best to respond. Here's one for chat as well. What is your favorite Ubisoft game of all time and why? Leave me a comment. Remember to hit subscribe and to ring that notifications bell to stay up to date on all my latest uploads and posts. All my socials, including links to all of today's sources, can be found in the video description. A massive and heartfelt thank you goes out to the now over 245,000 of you legends from across the globe who've already taken the plunge, you've hit subscribe, and you keep coming back on the daily to support the channel. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer, signing off.